Hi, I'm Rex Black, President of RBCS. Welcome to the RBCS YouTube channel. Hey, I hope you enjoy all these free resources that are available here. And do us one favor. We need to keep the lights on and we need your help to do that. So, when you need testing and quality related services, training, consulting, expert services, you name it, let us be one of the bidders on that next job. We don't expect to get all of your business, but we'd like to get a chance. Thanks and enjoy the shows.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello. On behalf of RBCS, RBCS New Zealand, and Software Testworks, we welcome everyone today to this webinar on 10 worst things I ever did or saw that screwed up testing. I am Rex Black, President of RBCS, a worldwide testing and quality assurance firm serving clients ranging from small startups to Fortune 20 global enterprises. Since 1994, RBCS has been both a pioneer and a leader in quality hardware and software testing. RBCS has offices in the United States, New Zealand, Australia, and Sri Lanka with partners around the world. RBCS delivers insight and confidence to our clients, helping them get quality software and hardware products to market on time and with measurable return on investment. RBCS has a team of international consultants that deliver customized training, consulting, and outsourcing services for companies that are looking to improve their test and quality assurance practices. RBCS has helped hundreds of companies reduce development costs and support costs while assuring the best quality products are delivered to their customers. I'm the author of Pragmatic Software Testing, Advanced Software Testing Volumes 1 and 2, Foundations of Software Testing, Critical Testing Processes, and Managing the Testing Process. I hold a degree in Computer Science and Engineering from UCLA. Also past president of the International Software Testing Qualifications Board and the American Software Testing Qualifications Board. Before we start the presentation, a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar, please feel free to submit them throughout the presentation via your webinar interface. There's no need to ask for presentation copies, as the presentation will be on the web at www.rbcs-us.com. Now, if you are having problems with either the audio or visual components of this webinar, please contact GoToWebinar support. If for whatever reason you cannot get to the webinar online, or if you are dealing with an unreliable connection, please download the slides from the basic library at www.rbcs-us.com and be sure to use the telephone to connect rather than voice over IP. Okay, on with the show. So today's presentation, this is fun. It's about doing stupid things. Not being stupid on purpose, of course, but with the best of intentions. So over the last 26 years, you can imagine that, like anybody else, I've done some stupid things as a test professional. And working with thousands of clients, vendors, course attendees, and others, I've seen other people do stupid things too. Bottom line, stupid happens. So today, we'll look at stupid things that people have done in the hopes that we can all learn how not to be stupid in the same way in the future. So, on the note of being stupid, we open up with the Three Stooges here, clearly plotting something not very bright, and the misadventures will ensue. And I don't know about you, but every now and then I've been on a project and I've looked around and I've asked myself, which of the Stooges am I right now? And I'm going to go through a few ways where I found myself in that position or saw other people that should have been asking that question of themselves. Okay, now, one of the things I think is important here is that we be honest with ourselves, and at least, even if we don't want to admit it to others, that we have all done dumb things. I mean, I'm trying to make this sound funny and be light about it because I think sometimes we get all ashamed. Oh, I can't believe I did that, and you try to hide stuff, and it really, maybe there are political reasons for doing that within an organization, but if you won't admit it to yourself, then you can't avoid doing it in the future if you can't admit something is a mistake. And also, I think it's good for us to look at dumb things that other people have done in an attempt to avoid doing those. I know the saying that any fool can learn from his own mistakes, but a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. So I'm going to give you a rundown of 10 things that I think are dumb, and I'm going to explain to you why they are dumb. And I'm going to try to give you some ideas on how to avoid it, because it certainly doesn't do us any good if I say this is stupid, but I don't give you any clue as to how not to do the stupid thing. Now, these are going to be specifics, and at the end of the talk, I'm going to get into something a little bit more generic, which is how to develop a plan to find other dumb things that you might be doing and convert your test team into a smart team. Okay, this list is in no particular order, just the order in which things occurred to me as I was creating this presentation. So first on the list is falling in love with a tool. I'm all for tools, don't get me wrong, but one should approach them with a clear-eyed strategy and a sense of what is to be accomplished with them. Now, one company many years ago, we had an automated test system that allowed us to submit thousands of queries to the application under test, which was a database query tool that ran on multiple operating system database combinations. And so we had these queries, and we ported these queries across all sorts of different supported OS database combinations, and we would run them and compare the expected results. We thought it was great. We loved it. We spent a lot of time propagating that tool and its test capabilities across different platforms. Okay, well, this is reminiscent of the old line about you give the child a hammer and the whole world becomes a nail. What we tested and tested and tested and tested was correctness of queries across different operating system database combinations. Now, basically what that is a form of compatibility testing, right? And that's fine. Compatibility testing is important, and correctness of query results for a query tool is obviously very important. But there were a bunch of other aspects of the tool that we didn't, or the system that we didn't test. Why? Because the tool couldn't test them. Now, as you can imagine, we missed bugs in those areas, and customers were angry. Customers were calling up tech support saying, "What's up with you guys? I can't believe you sent us this software. It won't install properly, or the user interface is horrible." And this created, of course, a lot of heat being directed at us. Now, what we came to realize was, hey, we need to have some manual testing to cover these additional important areas that we can't test with the tool. And so that was a very important lesson. Don't let a tool dictate what you will and won't test. A tool is a means to an end, but your coverage, what you need to test, is something that you need to understand and analyze and decide and build consensus on before you go running off to do your testing. You need to make sure that the tool is not in charge of your strategy, but rather your strategy is in charge of your tool. Okay, now this one is no fun, but it must be said. If you are a manager, director, some person who has direct reports, at some point or another in your career as such, you will need to fire someone. You will need to get rid of somebody. And one of the biggest mistakes you can make when you're in that situation is to not do it, to dodge that responsibility because it's just too hard. And it is hard. It's hard on multiple levels. In some cases, there are a lot of roadblocks that organizations and laws create to try to prevent you from doing that or to make it difficult for you to do that. And it's also just hard on a personal level because, assuming that you're not a complete jerk, you don't actually derive any pleasure from denying somebody their paycheck. But if somebody is in a position they shouldn't be in, then you got to ask yourself, who exactly are you doing a favor here? So here's an example. I had a very discontented employee a number of years ago, and I was working as a test manager. I think the root of the problem was that when I was hired to come in and run that team, the existing team, she felt that she should have been promoted. And I think that the seeds of the problem were laid in that the people who hired me, who brought me in, really didn't plow the field with her properly in the sense of, didn't give her clear reasons why she would not be promoted into that position. So I think she felt like that she had been passed over inappropriately, and so she she basically was very resistant to direction, and she would do things that weren't part of her job. She would get engaged with the developers to do debugging. She would make all sorts of disparaging remarks about the rest of the team and me and my capabilities of managing the team. And I'm not perfect, and I don't claim that I didn't make any mistakes while I was managing that team, but if you report to somebody, there's a right and a wrong way to go about giving them feedback on what you think about what they're doing, and running around backstabbing them is not appropriate under any circumstances. Now, this maybe would have been a tolerable situation, maybe, if her work was good. But unfortunately, her work was really bad. Like I said, she got distracted with things that she shouldn't have gotten involved in. She would just do generally poor quality work, testing work, test tool work. So basically, from the outside, people would hear her running around bad-mouthing me, bad-mouthing the team, and getting involved in things she shouldn't have been involved in. And outside stakeholders, people in development especially, and also in tech support, saw her as basically both incompetent and simultaneously a troublemaker. And because I didn't effectively deal with that, their perception was that I was a poor leader. Now, what did I do to try to deal with it? Well, I basically tried to counsel her, to correct her, to give her coaching sessions and so forth. And ultimately, it started to escalate to the point where it was written warnings going in her files and so forth. So I was going through the steps to position her to be let go, but very slowly. And it really, I would wait until things really blew up. And the problem was that this deprived me of my ability to guide the rest of the team. And there's a whole line about a management saying that says that if you have a troubled employee in your team, you will spend about half of your time dealing with that person. So basically, if you have a troubled employee, you have half decapitated your team as a manager. You have removed half of your attention from your team, and you're now leaving them to thrash. And that, of course, compounds the damage done because people who need guidance don't get it. And I think the bottom line here, as painful as it is, as painful as it will be, is that if someone can't fit into your team the way you've defined it to be and the roles that need to be played, that person needs to go find something else to do with their life. Now, this is a tough economy right now. I understand that, and it's a tough time to fire people, without a doubt. And surely I'm not saying, just cavalierly do this, rush into it. But, if you've tried everything you can to get the person back on track and they continue to be an incompetent malcontent, then ultimately you're not doing anyone any favors, including the person that you're not firing, because the longer that situation persists, the more they're going to come to the conclusion that their behavior is actually appropriate and allowed within an organization. Okay. Now, next on the list, writing bad bug reports. This is a stealth, stupid thing, as it happens, can happen very easily. People get in a rush, and people get sloppy. And we've seen some really bad bug reports from working with clients. And these 3 bullet items here at the top are all examples of actual bug reports. You might say, well, it's a summary. No, that's the whole thing. So, one of my favorites here, test failed. The bug report did not say which test it was. It's like we have 1,000 test cases, one of them failed. Guess which one? This is not helpful information. Blue screen on page 2. This is another one of my favorites. No indication in the bug report on what was going on page 2, not to mention what had happened on page 1, what kind of inputs were there, not helpful. Well, my favorite all time is this one, faster/random. Now remember, this is the entire bug report. There is nothing else to support this. Faster/random. This one is almost Zen-like in its total absence of informative value. It's like a little koan that you could chant to yourself to clear your mind. It doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't tell anybody anything. Now, you might say, well, it's surely rectifiable. Developer can come back and ask, well, what did you mean? What exactly is going on with this report and so forth? Yeah, but it shouldn't have to. Bug reports should be freestanding. They're information deliverables. They're a key information deliverable. In fact, in terms of the work products that come out of the test team, and I say come out of, not for internal use, but the things that you deliver to people outside of testing, the bug reports are probably, in terms of volume, the key deliverable. And in terms of generating the test return on investment, for those of you who've heard me talk about that and how finding bugs that need to get fixed is one of the key measurable value adds of a test team. If you're not producing good bug reports, you're not only frustrating people, you're undermining one of the key value adds. You are reducing the return on the testing investment. Now, in order to write a good bug report, in order to write a good anything, in fact, you have to understand your audience, okay? Who are the people who need to read your bug reports? Well, certainly there are developers. When we think of developers, right? Need to give them the information they need to fix the bugs that we find. There are managers, cross-functional team of managers, presumably, who will make the fix-defer decision. They need to understand the impact of the problem on customers, users, the business. And there are tech support people. When we don't fix bugs, some bugs will be deferred. The tech support people will need to know, hey, what are the known bugs in this product? What are we facing? What are we going to deal with? Is there a workaround? And then finally, there are the testers. Testers should know each other's bug reports so that they don't do silly things like file duplicate bug reports, for example, and so that they don't try to run tests that are blocked. So, those are 4 typical audiences. Now there can be others, and I would encourage you to think about that. Think about who are the audiences for my bug reports. When I write a bug report, if you're a tester, when my team writes a bug report, if you're a test manager, think about who's this going to? Who's going to read it? What do they need to understand this and to act on it, right? Testing as a whole should produce information that helps people guide the project to success. And we should be constantly asking ourselves, anytime we're producing a work product, but especially bug reports, how's this going to help other people in the project guide the project to success? Now, you might say, oh, I can do that and think about that. And, well, yeah, good. It's not enough to just think about it. You need to go out and engage with the audience that you identify. When you've thought about who are the people that I write my bug reports for, go ask them, how am I doing? What information would you like to see from me? How could I better improve the style and the readability and content of my bug reports? This leads us to the next point. And some of you might be thinking, oh, why should I ask these other people? Okay, well, this is another big stupid thing that we sometimes do as testers, and I'm not saying that any of you are doing this, but we've certainly seen it done with a lot of our clients. It's forgetting that you're providing a service. You're a service provider. So I recently did an assessment, and in our assessments we talked to a lot of people inside and outside test team, trying to figure out how the testing is going and what can be improved. Most of the interviewees outside the test team said test group adds no value. Think about that. The test group adds no value. Basically, we don't want them here. We don't care if the test team continues to exist in this organization. Now, if that's not a scary thought in the middle of this recession, I don't know what is. Okay? Now, this was a few years ago, and the economy was better, but this could happen now. This could be going on now and probably is going on now in a lot of organizations. Now, excuse me, test group adds no value. Well, testing by itself, the poking and prodding of the system, writing down of bug reports, tracking of test results, those acts by themselves have no intrinsic value, none. Testing only has value when it connects to something that the organization and other stakeholders value. There are people in the organization, perhaps people you haven't yet thought of, who are interested in quality and are interested in testing and are interested in having competence in the product and are interested in knowing about what's wrong with the product. These are things you can help them understand. These are services you can provide. We need to identify the services we can provide and identify our consumers, our customers, the people for whom in the organization and perhaps even outside the organization we produce this information, and then work with them to make it better. So I just gave you an example on the previous slide. Who needs the information in your bug reports and how can you make it better? Okay, this is a great conversation to have, and it's an easy conversation to have. And you know what? Not only is there value in having this conversation in the sense that you will be able to do a better job and thus be more effective and efficient as a tester or a test manager, there's value in having this conversation, period. There's a political value. It sends all the right messages about you and your organization if you're a test manager, or you as a professional tester within your organization. You send a message to people that you care about the quality of your work. And it sends exactly the wrong message, particularly given our association with quality, that if we don't have this conversation. So I really would encourage you to do this. It's good on so many different levels if you just remember that you're providing a service and then continuously strive to find ways to provide that service better. Now, when you do that, that's going to lead you to the next possible stupid thing that I want you to try to avoid doing, and this is ignoring a key stakeholder. So, one time, long ago, when I was young and foolish, I didn't ask all the right people this question: how are we doing? How can we do better? I forgot to ask the tech support team. Now, I have an excuse. It's a bad excuse, but I'll let you in on it so that you don't fall for it yourself. My excuse was the tech support manager wasn't in the same office. She was in a different office. She was in a different city, different state. I would have had to, I don't know, pick up the phone, send her an email, do something horribly inconvenient like that to try to get in touch with her. Horribly inconvenient. It's out of sight, out of mind. Now, yes, this is a well-known human resources / management paradox that people, you take people who communicate daily and put them just on separate floors in the same building, and the amount of communication between them drops, by an order of magnitude right away. Yeah, it happens, but one of the things that we're supposed to do as managers, if you're a manager, is to manage those kinds of problems, and I blew it. Okay, big mistake, because she and her team were not happy with our test coverage, and they were not happy with the bugs we missed. And ultimately, the agitating that she and her team did about the dysfunctionality, if you will, of our testing led to, in confluence with some other unfortunate circumstances that were going on, led to the test team being disbanded. Now, I mean, I don't think that it was entirely the case that this one person's agitating was the only cause. These things never happen for a single reason, but it certainly was a contributor. That, along with the fact that the business was in trouble and they were looking for something to cut. But, as the Japanese saying goes, the nail that sticks up gets pounded down. And I definitely transformed myself and my team into the nail that stuck up in that organization, drew the attention, unwanted attention of people by virtue of the obstreperous complaints of one of the key stakeholder teams. Now, I got another excuse, and it's not a good one, but I'll lay it on you. Most of the test groups we assess have and do ignore at least one key stakeholder. So I guess my excuse there is, well, I'm in good company. Yeah, everybody does it. Yeah, that's true. But, why do it, right? Like I said, how inconvenient is it? You send an email, pick up the phone. If you happen to be in the same building, go downstairs, get a little exercise going up and down the stairs. It's not hard. So this really, there are all sorts of great excuses for why people ignore key stakeholders, but they just don't really hold any water. None of them are valid excuses. And remember, the job you save may very well be your own or your team's. Now, you want to identify the stakeholders. You want to keep in touch with them. You want to make them feel like, yeah, the test team is looking out for me. They're trying to do the right things. But this needs to be more than just a touchy-feely, emotional, subjective exercise. This needs to be measurable. So I recently wrote a chapter for a book that will be coming out in the next 4 or 5 months called Beautiful Testing. And the chapter that I wrote was called Beautiful Testing Satisfies Stakeholders. And one of the things that I talked about at length in that chapter was working with stakeholders to identify key performance indicators, metrics basically, that will allow you to measure how well you're doing and to improve that. This makes the discussion about how am I doing an objective one. Now certainly, perceptions matter, but data can shape perceptions, and I would encourage you to go into this with data because things can happen that that would be very difficult for you to control, and you need to shape the terms of the debate about how you're doing rather than be shaped by it entirely. Okay, now here's another thing. It's a really easy mistake to make as a test manager. Deliver bad news badly. Now the reason why testers and test managers make this mistake is because we have to deliver bad news so often. We have so many opportunities to make this mistake. Now, here's an example. I'm working as a test manager. The project is in serious, serious trouble. There's an enormous bug backlog. And so I go to the project manager and I tell him this. I say, we are in a world of hurt. Things are going very badly. There's this enormous bug backlog. It's 1,000 bugs. Well, this is a mistake. It was a mistake on a number of levels. And how was it that I was doing this badly? I mean, it was the truth. All those things were true, but what were the bad elements of it? Well, the number of them. One was I didn't tell them early enough in the project. It's like telling somebody after they've already fallen off a cliff, you should have been more careful and not fallen off the cliff. Now you're going to die. It's just not very helpful to deliver such information at that point. I mean, 500 bugs in the backlog, 500 bugs awaiting action, some sort of resolution, either fix, defer decision, or actual fixing. And if 1,000 bugs is a problem, isn't 500 bugs a problem? And if 500 bugs is a problem, isn't 250 bugs a problem? Isn't 200? Isn't maybe 150 or even 100? I mean, the project had been in a bad way and getting into a bad way for a long time, and yet by the time I told him, this really was, it was late in the game. I mean, it's just like that, as I said, you tell them something, they've already fallen off the cliff. And furthermore, I compounded this by not offering any good solutions to him when I told him. And now, at that point, I think, given the 1,000 bugs, I mean, there really weren't any good solutions. But earlier in time in the project, when, say, we had 250 bugs, I could have offered some good solutions. The only solution that I had to offer this guy at that point, when I told him, we've got this huge problem, so I said, well, I think we should just lock ourselves in the office over the weekend, all of the managers on the project team, and go through all the bug reports one by one and decide whether we need to fix or defer them. And then once we finish that exercise, we look at the bugs that we've decided we need to fix, and we decide how big of a schedule delay the project's going to take based on fixing those bugs. I mean, this is an unappealing option on a number of levels, One is it's like spend the entire weekend locked up with a bunch of people on this already very stress-filled project, right? Two is, at the end of the exercise, get fired, because basically the project stakeholders had already tolerated a couple schedule slips, and they were really out of patience with schedule slips at that point. So, you know, the clear thing, if we had gone through the exercise I recommended, was that we would come out with a revised schedule, which there's no way that it would be the same as current schedule, and I think the guy knew that, and he would go to the project stakeholders, and the project stakeholders would say, you guys, you know, the project management team have blown it, and they would start to fire people. So, not good solutions. Now, furthermore, one of the things this guy did when he got this information from me is he, of course, immediately ran down to talk to the development managers. Now, the development managers were embarrassed by this, right? Because all of a sudden, here's the project manager running around in their offices going, well, you know, my hair's on fire, you got all these bugs, what are you guys doing? You're not managing the bugs. So they look bad, right? So now they are embarrassed. So yet another mistake here. I have exposed my colleagues, embarrassed my colleagues in a completely unnecessary way, because, you know, I could have alternate reality. When the bug reports got up to, say, about 250 in the backlog, I could have called a meeting, just me and the development managers, and said, look, guys, we have got to get this under control because this thing is going to just explode and kill us. And we could have done it. And then we could have gone to the project management team and said, well, you know, this is what we've done, and this is what's going to happen next. And then, no problem. So, you know, one of the very wise thing that was said to me early on in my career as a manager, Betty Nemi, one of my early managers who taught me a lot about being a manager, she would say, panic early and avoid the rush. And what she meant by that was, you know, if you see trouble, don't just sit around and go, well, I hope something good will happen to make this go away. No. You need to get on top of it. You need to immediately act to resolve the problem. And this is the root of my mistake here, was a failure to gradually but determinedly and effectively escalate the situation so that we did get brought back under control before it got to the situation where it was completely toxic. And make sure that when you deliver bad news, bring solutions, and palatable ones. Now, some test managers and testers say, oh, yeah, you know, I don't think that's really my role. I shouldn't really have to do that. I mean, my job is to provide information. Well, yeah, okay. That's one way of looking at it. Here's an alternative. Most of the time, when we report bad news, the project is going to go forward. The only question is by what path. Now, the next question is, do you want to be influential in the choosing of that path, or do you want to be a bystander? I would suggest that you probably want to be influential. And you will never be more influential in choosing the path by which a bad project recovers than at that moment at which you escalate the fact that the project is in trouble. And then you offer solutions. You know, a drowning man grasps for a life jacket. If you're standing there throwing life jackets into the crowd as you're delivering the bad news, they're probably going to grab your life jacket, assuming that they think it'll work. So if you can present palatable options, you are very likely to be a very influential player in terms of how the project goes forward and how the project succeeds. And I think that is far preferable than trying to preserve some sort of illusion of disinterest in the success or failure of the project, because ultimately it is an illusion. We should be interested in helping the projects on which we work succeed. Okay, now I want to get back to something I was talking about a little bit before. I sort of alluded to this, and I'm going to finish with this point because this relates to another mistake. Failure to define the mission, the objectives, the goals. What is your job, and how are you doing? And I said, you know, you need to do that. Now, I once did that in an organization and was surprised at the variance in the answers. Everybody had different ideas. Everybody had different ideas first in terms of activities, and even to the extent that there was overlap in the activities, the expectations were quite different in terms of how effective and efficient they expected me to be at that. And that has really been a recurring theme that I've seen going forward as a consultant with clients, that people have widely varying expectations about the test team and what it would mean for the test team to be effective and efficient. And this is a problem. One of the things that I'd like to boil this down to is the filter versus shield problem. Now, properly conceived, testing operations are a filter. They filter out defects, and the filter really, in the true sense, that you catch them, and somebody else has to clean the filter, right? Somebody else has to actually take that thing that you caught, that bug, and fix it and make it go away. Or, alternately, they can take it and throw it downstream, which is what deferring it does, right? So you're a filter. Now, the problem is that sometimes people think of testing teams as a shield, a bug shield. Now, the success criteria for filters and the success criteria for shields are very different. So, effectiveness at stopping things, let's just look at one of them. A filter, everybody's going to accept, is effective at stopping some kinds of things and not effective at stopping other kinds of things. And a filter, everyone will also accept, has some level of effectiveness, some percentage of things it will catch. And people understand that once you get above a certain percentage of effectiveness, it becomes very difficult to get any higher than that. A shield, though, in order to be a good shield, has to stop everything. You can't stop like 99% of the arrows. It has to stop everything. Now, if people expect you to be a bug shield, an impenetrable bug shield, then you can't succeed. Now, the other thing is this idea of quality assurance versus testing. Now, quality assurance, if we take this word apart, and I don't like to get into these word games, because I think that too many testers, they make themselves sound like beside the point nitpickers when they get all bound up about words. But some words have implications, and I think quality assurance is one of them. We can't really assure quality. Putting something on a scale doesn't change what it weighs. Similarly, running something through a set of tests does not change its quality. It simply measures it. It evaluates it. I think there's some danger in letting people get this sense that we're a quality assurance group if we can't actually affect the process upstream in ways that actually do assure quality. So the bottom line here is that if people have widely differing ideas about what your team can do, then you can't succeed. You just won't, because you're serving too many different masters. Or if everybody has the same idea about what your team can do and it sets the bar too high, like 100% defect detection effectiveness, as an example, then you can't succeed. So you need to, as I mentioned in my discussion about that chapter in Beautiful Testing, you need to have defined success criteria, defined metrics, and you need to measure against that, and if to the extent that you're not succeeding, improve, and to the extent that you are succeeding, make sure that people understand that if you're achieving the targets, then make sure that you make people aware of the fact that you are achieving your targets. Now, how do you do this? Well, basically, you need to work with your stakeholders to try to define your mission, and this is going to include a lot of very sensitive discussions, because you're going to need to try to finesse some things and make some bad expectations go away. And you could say, oh, that's going to be hard. Well, yeah, but it's going to be easier than having people labor under the disillusion or the misillusion that you're doing some particular thing, and then you're not. That ultimately is, you can ignore that for some amount of time, but it is a ticking bomb As I've mentioned before, dissatisfied stakeholders have a way of making that dissatisfaction known. So define your mission and then figure out how you're going to actually succeed at achieving that mission and measure that you do. Now, I mentioned quality assurance on the previous slide, and I want to follow up on that a little bit because this is another thing that we see with clients is this taking sole responsibility for quality. And one of the ways that you know that there's some sort of problem here is if uniformly the reaction to field failures is always, why did you guys miss that? Why did the test team miss that? If that's the reaction as opposed to, well, gee, it's just too bad that the developers put that bug in there, or it's too bad that we didn't capture that requirement, or it's too bad that we have this design problem, we should be concerned when there's this perception that no matter what happened upstream, the fact that we were at the very end of the process didn't catch anything, and that's our fault that thing is still there. That's a problem. That indicates a bad expectation that needs to be dealt with. Now, that expectation is sometimes our fault. And the reason I say that is I think this is, you define a test team as quality assurance team, because it's called quality assurance, and then you don't have a clearly defined mission or goals or objectives with measurable performance indicators, success criteria for those goals, then what expectation does that phrase quality assurance set up? And there's a major disconnect between this measuring quality at the end versus assuring quality. As I said before, you're putting something on a scale doesn't change what it weighs. So you really have to be clear on this, that if an organization wants a quality assurance role, if it really wants that, as opposed to just saying, oh, we need QA, but really understanding quality assurance, this is something that's involved early, and it drives the process from beginning to end with the goal of optimizing quality, within certain constraints, of course, but really driving process. Requirements reviews, design reviews, code reviews, static analysis of code, automated unit testing, continuous integration, some sort of stepwise component integration testing, all the way through prior to handed off to an independent test team. That's stuff that you'd have to drive if you wanted to be a quality assurance team. Now, maybe people don't want that. Maybe they go, oh, no, we don't want to put you to that much charge. Okay, that's cool. You can still do something extremely valuable at the end, which is determine the level of residual risk and let management decide. So, you transform yourself from being the owner of quality to being an assessor. And this does not conflict with what I was talking about before, about when you deliver bad news, deliver solutions too. Those are consistent. You can be an assessor, but not a disinterested one. I'm not saying be disinterested and pretend you don't care whether the project succeeds or fails. But I'm saying I'm going to focus on getting the best information about the residual level of quality risk at the end of the process. That's what I'm going to focus on. Then that's great, and everything else is a byproduct. Okay, because this ties into the next classic tester mistake, being an unappointed process cop, trying to make change happen in the process upstream without any authority. I'll give you an anecdote on this one because this is important and it's an easy trap to fall into. Did a project for a client once in Paris, and we were there to help them build a unit testing framework, and so this is kind of tangential to the main thrust of our engagement, but I always like to, in an engagement like this, get a sense of who's who and what their needs are, and there was some possible reuse opportunities for this unit testing harness too in the system testing arena, so it made sense to do some amount of discussion about the relationship between development and test with the different parties. So I asked the director of development, I'll just call him Boris. I asked Boris, what do you think of the QA manager? And I'll call her Natasha. And we were in a conference room. The door was open. The guy got up and closed the conference room door, which is always a sign that you're about to hear something really interesting. He sat down. He looked at me. He said, Natasha is a narcissistic dilettante. And I didn't mean that as a compliment. And I said, oh, why is that? He said, well, she regularly goes into the development area. And the way they had like these open office layouts, so you'd have developers all sitting together in this big open room and testers sitting together. Said she regularly goes into the development area and starts to harangue and lecture the developers about things like unit testing and static analysis and so forth. And this always creates a great deal of dissension and unhappiness amongst my team. And they come to me and they say, you know, we don't understand why she's lecturing us about this stuff. Her testing operation's a complete mess. She should mind her own knitting and not be coming in here and getting in our way. And you know, that makes sense. That made perfect sense. She wasn't very technical, so you know, she really wasn't in a position to give a lot of good advice, and she was just lecturing them. And so how did this happen? Well, the way this happened was she was promoted into the QA position, and she'd never done QA before. She hadn't been a programmer before either. She was not a technical person. So she got promoted into that QA director position. And so she went to the VP who promoted her and said, what do I do? What is my ambit here? What is my mission? And he said, well, I don't know. You just do QA. So she went and bought a book on QA, and this was one of those books that talked about QA very much from a process point of view. So she thought, oh, okay, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. So she goes, says to her boss, so, you know, when the book says I need to do this, 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 and this, is that right? And he said, well, you know, whatever the book says, it must be right. Now, the problem was he didn't communicate that to other people. And so here she is running around making a nuisance of herself from the perception of the development team at the behest of the VP of development overall, without that being effectively communicated to the director of development. Now, let me be clear on what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that we shouldn't care whether we get good requirements. Obviously, well-defined requirements are good. If you listen to my talk about Agile testing challenges a while ago, you know that not having an adequately defined test basis can create a lot of challenges. Not having an adequately defined test oracle can create a lot of challenges. But, you know, what are you going to do? Same thing with unit testing. You go, you know, it's good to get unit tested code. It's good to get solid code. But what are you going to do? Do you actually have the authority to make that happen? And has that authority been properly delegated to you? Not like what happened with Natasha. So here's what I would suggest. You want to make change in an organization. Instead of running around telling people about how good it will be after they make the change, focus on the pain. What we found in our assessments is demonstration of people, sales truism, that people move away from pain much faster than they move towards a desired state. Seems strange, but it is true. So if you can find pain, and it might be pain that people aren't aware of, but you can find pain associated with certain bad practices, and then you escalate those with solutions to people who actually can implement those solutions, I think you'll be a lot more effective than if you just run around being the unappointed process cop. And you won't be blowing your own political capital at the same time. Now, ignoring the bad expectations. I've been kind of circling around this big mistake, and now I'm going to land right on it. This is the number one bad thing that we as testers do all the time. I'll give you a classic example of that. I'm doing an assessment. I'm asking various people, you know, what the test team does, what their mission is, because they didn't have a defined mission statement or policy or anything. So I'm asking, what does the test team do? And people come back going, oh, yeah, they find bugs. And then I said, so one development manager, I asked him, what percentage of the bugs do you think they should find? I actually asked everybody this. The one development manager had a particularly striking response. He looked at me like I was, dumb, and he said, well, all of them, of course. And I said, well, given that the requirements are changing often up to just a day or two before the product goes into production, and given that the code is changing often hours before the product goes into production, and given that there are 100 products, 100 applications in the data center, and they're all changing completely independently and dropping into the test environment without any coordination with each other, isn't it a little bit unreasonable to think that they would find all of the bugs? And he looked at me and, was apparently in the mood to make some sort of compromise and said, well, they should at least find Six Sigma. Now, Six Sigma, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a whole total quality management kind of concept. But what he meant by that was they would be allowed to miss 3 bugs out of 1 million that were delivered to them. Now, we have clients that have defect detection effectiveness in the 99% range, and some even above 99%. It's typically very expensive to get there, but it can be done. But 99.999997, or however many nines there'd be before the 7, never seen it, don't expect to ever see it. I think that's just, that's surreal. And certainly in the environment in which these testers had to operate, there was no way that was going to happen. So, here's this guy who has this outlandish expectation. Now, you might say, so what? That is just clearly boneheaded. Couldn't possibly be getting any traction. He was. I'll tell you how I know he was. He and other people there were getting big traction with this. After the assessment, I met with, of course, I was working with the director of testing, but he reported to the CIO, and I met with the CIO to deliver my findings to him. And I thought the test team was doing pretty well under the circumstances. There were a number of things that needed to be addressed, and recommendations, and he said, okay, well, that sounds all well and good, and off he went. Well, about a year later, I'm doing an assessment for another company, and it turns out that this CIO had left the company he was at before and is now working in this new company. This is a complete coincidence. And it turned out that he was actually, as part of the assessment, it came to light that he was looking for a director of testing. And I said, well, why don't you hire, let's call him Bob. Why don't you hire Bob? And he said, well, I like Bob. I thought he was a good guy. But everybody was telling me I should fire Bob and that he was incompetent. And I said, but he wasn't. He was doing a fine job. Well, I don't know, maybe he was, but nobody really liked it much. And we're very happy with it. But I don't want to deal with that same kind of thing here. Now see, this guy, by not managing the expectations, very, very talented guy, very smart manager, definitely one of the smartest managers I've worked with as a consultant in years, had made a critical mistake that damaged his career prospects going forward. This CIO, who said, a pretty influential guy, regularly listed as one of the sort of leading CIOs in magazines like, Information Week and things like that. He now is of the opinion, no, I shouldn't hire that guy again. This is not good. You don't want to do that. So what could this guy have done? Should people expect you to find all the bugs? No. Well, should people expect you to find important bugs? Yes, we definitely want to sign up for that because, as I said before, major part of the test team's ROI is finding bugs that need to get fixed. So you can do that, but this requires a number of preconditions. One is you need to do risk-based testing so that you actually are focused on the important bugs. You need to be given stable systems to test.